What if an empire could survive the fall of its own capital? What if that empire called itself Roman, even when Rome itself was just a memory? What if its people burned the icons of their own saints? Imagine the empire of Byzantium, though they never called it that, a Christian realm thriving for 11 centuries amid chaos, intrigue, and relentless transformation. But why has its story been eclipsed, forgotten by the West for so long? The answers lie in choices that shaped worlds and in irreversible consequences that echoed through history. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, like it, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. The Roman Empire did not die in a day. It faltered slowly, caught in a fatal spiral of decay. By the 3rd century AD, the empire was crumbling not from a single invasion, but from a corrosive internal breakdown. Known as the crisis of the 3rd century, this half-century of turmoil saw over 50 emperors rise and fall, some lasting mere months. Each new ruler often met a violent death, assassinated by soldiers, rivals, or conspirators. Power became a deadly prize, and the legions meant to protect the empire turned into marauders, pillaging the provinces they were sworn to defend. As generals seized power, proclaiming themselves emperors, the empire fractured. On the eastern borders, the revitalized Persian Sassanid Empire launched fierce attacks. To the north and west, Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine and Danube, pushing deeper into Roman lands. Cities emptied as trade collapsed and the currency devalued. Silver coins lost nearly all their silver. Peasants abandoned farms, crushed under unbearable taxes. Inflation spiraled. Barter replaced money in many regions. The empire was bleeding out, inch by agonizing inch. Yet the empire refused to die quietly. Amidst chaos, Emperor Aurelian emerged, known as the Restorer of the World, who reunited the empire briefly in the 270s. But it was Emperor Diocletian, ascending in 284 AD, who reshaped everything. Recognizing the empire's vastness was ungovernable by one man, he devised the Tetrarchy, 4 emperors sharing power, 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars, each ruling a sector. He divided the empire into 12 dioceses, expanded the bureaucracy, fixed prices by edict, and transformed court life into a rigid hierarchy where subjects prostrated before the emperor. No longer a simple, victorious general, the emperor became an almost divine figure, distant and untouchable. But these reforms were also a desperate attempt to hold back the tide, masking the fractures beneath. This was not a rebirth, but the slow birth of something new. Byzantium, an empire born from the ashes of Rome's decline, but burdened by its past and torn by internal strife. Fast forward centuries. An emperor weds a theatrical actress shunned by nobility, redefining justice for millions. Generals reconquer Italy, North Africa, parts of Spain, only to watch it all crumble in the next generation. Monks gouge out each other's eyes in bitter wars over painted images. A Christian crusade raises the greatest Christian city on earth. The final emperor dies in the ruins of his own walls, his body so mangled that only the eagles embroidered on his purple boots identify it. Why do we call this empire Byzantine when its citizens called themselves Romans until the last breath. How did it outlast the Western Empire by 1,000 years, only to vanish so completely that the West nearly forgot its existence? This is a story of fateful choices, political gambits, religious zealotry, cultural metamorphosis that shaped Europe, the Middle East, and Russia. Yet for all its influence, this epic remains hidden from the spotlight, waiting to be told. Before we dive deeper, understand this. Byzantium was never born overnight in 330 AD when Constantine moved the capital. It was a slow agony, a near invisible transformation of the Roman world cracking under its own contradictions. This is the story not just of an empire, but of human fear, desperate decisions, and the irreversible consequences that followed. An epic of survival and collapse that echoes through history to this day. Join Quiet History as we unravel the fate of an empire that defined civilizations, reshaped continents, and bore witness to the weight of choices no one could undo. This is Byzantium, not the relic you think you know, but a living, breathing saga of power, faith, and ruin. Subscribe now and step into a world where every decision mattered and every consequence was unforgettable. What transforms a man into something almost godlike? Diocletian, once a mere mortal, now cloaked in purple and gold, surrounded by rituals borrowed from ancient Persian courts, becomes an unapproachable figure. His authoritarian transformation stabilizes a crumbling empire, but at a steep cost, an ever-growing bureaucracy fueled by rising taxes. Yet this semblance of order brings chains, peasants bound to their land, artisans tied to their crafts, locking society into rigid classes where social mobility vanishes. This is just the beginning of consequences nobody foresaw. The Tetrarchy was Diocletian's brilliant solution, on paper. 4 rulers to govern an unwieldy empire. But when he abdicates in 305, the fragile system collapses. 4 emperors, followed by their successors, descend into bloody civil war, tearing the empire apart. In this chaos rises Constantine, not the strongest contender, not the obvious victor, but a man armed with something far more dangerous: vision. Or is it boundless ambition disguised as vision? In the year 312, Constantine marches toward Rome to face Maxentius, the master of Italy. Before the fateful battle at the Milvian Bridge, something extraordinary happens. According to Christian chroniclers, Constantine witnesses a vision, a glowing cross in the sky inscribed with the words "In hoc signo vinces," meaning, "In this sign you will conquer." He commands his soldiers to paint the Chi-Rho, the symbol of Christ, on their shields. The next day, Maxentius drowns in the Tiber, sealing Constantine's victory and entry into Rome. But this triumph is more than military. It's a turning point for an empire on the brink of transformation. Constantine becomes the first Christian emperor, not through immediate declaration, but by calculated, relentless steps. In the year 313, alongside Licinius, he issues the Edict of Milan, granting religious freedom to Christians. Persecutions end, confiscated church property is returned, and bishops gain unprecedented privileges. Constantine himself presides over the Council of Nicaea, in 325, where 318 bishops debate the nature of Christ, define the date of Easter, and craft a creed that echoes through centuries. Yet a haunting question remains. Why does Constantine choose Christianity? Was it genuine faith, born from mystical revelation, or cold political calculation? The religion had spread despite persecution, offering a structured network of bishops loyal to Rome, a doctrine that transcended ethnic and linguistic divides. By embracing Christianity, Constantine doesn't just adopt a faith. He wields a tool to unify a fractured empire. He elevates a once persecuted sect nearly to the status of state religion. Yet he delays his baptism until his deathbed in 337, preserving a strategic ambiguity that keeps his power fluid. But Constantine's most earth-shattering decision is not religious. It is geographical. In the year 324, after defeating Licinius and reunifying the empire under his sole rule, he chooses to found a new capital. Not in Rome, steeped in republican traditions and proud senatorial families who viewed emperors as usurpers. Instead, he selects Byzantium, a modest Greek city straddling the Bosphorus, the narrow strait dividing Europe and Asia, connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. This choice is brilliant strategically. Byzantium controls critical trade routes between East and West, but the empire's challenges multiply. The Visigoths, fleeing the Huns, are allowed to settle as federates inside the empire, yet imperial officials exploit and starve them, igniting a brutal uprising. In the year 378, at the Battle of Adrianople in Thrace, the Visigoths shatter the Roman legions. The empire's fate hangs in the balance. Each decision, Diocletian's reforms, Constantine's vision, the founding of Constantinople, carries immense consequences, reverberating through history. The empire teeters on the edge, shaped and shaken by leaders wrestling with fear, ambition, and the impossible weight of their choices. What if even one decision had been different? The fate of Rome and the world might have changed forever. If you want to dive deeper into the dramatic twists of history that shaped our world, subscribe to Quiet History and never miss the stories behind the choices that changed everything. What if the fate of an empire hinged on a single battle? Valens, the Roman emperor, meets his end in a brutal clash that changes everything. His body is never found, likely consumed in the flames of a farm set ablaze by the Goths. This battle marks a seismic shift. For the first time, a barbarian army crushes Roman legions on Roman soil itself. The Goths are no longer mere raiders. They become an existential threat, entrenched in the empire's very heart. But what comes next is far more perilous. Enter Theodosius I, a ruler who chooses diplomacy over outright war. He negotiates with the Goths, settling them as federates on the Balkans and recruiting them into the Roman army. A pragmatic move, but a dangerous one. The Goths retain their leaders, their weapons, their identity. The empire has invited a ticking time bomb within its walls. Meanwhile, Theodosius makes Nicene Christianity the empire's official faith in the year 380 through the Edict of Thessalonica. But this religious decree sparks new fractures. Heretics, pagans, and Jews face increasing repression. Pagan temples shudder, often destroyed by zealous Christian mobs. In Alexandria, the Serapeum is sacked by Christian monks in the year 391, its library obliterated, statues shattered. The ancient Olympic Games, symbols of pagan tradition, are banned by 393. The empire is transformed into a thoroughly Christian realm. Yet this forced unity breeds bitter division. Arians against Nicene Christians, Monophysites clashing with Diophysites. Theological battles that seem abstract ignite crowds, spark riots, and fuel slaughter. When Theodosius dies in 395, the fragile unity shatters irrevocably. The empire is divided between his two sons. Arcadius, barely 18, rules the east from Constantinople. Honorius, only 11, governs the west, first from Milan, then Ravenna. Rome itself is deemed too vulnerable to remain capital. What was meant as a temporary split hardens into permanent fracture. The two halves drift apart, never to be reunited. The Eastern Roman Empire, rich, urban, Greek-speaking, preserves Roman bureaucracy and thrives. But the Western Empire, Latin-speaking, poorer, rural, crumbles under barbarian invasions. The West's agony unfolds across the 5th century. In 410, the Visigoth king Alaric sacks Rome, the city's first sack in 8 centuries. The shock reverberates throughout the ancient world. The Vandals sweep through Gaul and Spain, seizing Carthage in 439 and cutting off Rome's grain supplies. Meanwhile, the Huns, under Attila, ravage the Balkans during the 440s, extracting massive tribute paid by Constantinople in gold. Attila then turns westward, invading Gaul in 451, halted only by a coalition of Romans and barbarians at the Catalonian plains. He marches into Italy, but spares Rome after a fateful meeting with Pope Leo I. Suddenly, in 453, Attila dies on his wedding night, possibly from a drunken nosebleed. His empire collapses overnight. Rome faces another harrowing sack in 455, this time by the Vandals led by Gaiseric. They plunder the city methodically for 2 weeks, stripping it of treasures, statues, even gilded bronze tiles from the Temple of Jupiter. The West's decline accelerates toward an inevitable end. In 476, the barbarian chieftain Odoacer, leader of the Herules and a mercenary, dethrones the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a powerless teenager placed on the throne only months earlier by his father. Odoacer does not claim the imperial title. Instead, he sends the imperial regalia to Constantinople, symbolically acknowledging Emperor Zeno's authority in the east while ruling Italy as his own kingdom. The Western Roman Empire vanishes. No one ever again carries the title of Western Emperor. This fateful year marks, for historians, the end of antiquity and the dawn of the Middle Ages, though the transition is slow and uneven across regions. Yet, amid the West's collapse, Constantinople not only survives, but flourishes. How does the Eastern Empire endure when the West falls to pieces? If these shattering choices and their devastating consequences fascinate you, subscribe to Quiet History for more journeys into the turning points that shaped our world. Why does the East resist collapse, while the West crumbles beneath its own weight? What invisible threads hold the Eastern Empire together when the Western world slips into chaos? The answers lie tangled in wealth, power, and desperate choices that seal the fate of millions. The East is richer, more urbanized, densely populated, and economically vibrant. Egypt sends grain that feeds Constantinople's teeming masses. Syria produces oil, wine, and fine textiles. Asia Minor is a mosaic of thriving cities and bustling trade routes. Meanwhile, the West, already sinking into economic decay, turns rural and fragmented. Cities empty, roads become perilous, and commerce grinds to a halt. Vast villas transform into isolated fortresses, last bastions in a dying world. But this is only the first act of a brutal drama. The legendary Byzantine diplomacy is the next weapon in the East's arsenal. Eastern emperors pay barbarian tribes to strike the West, not their own lands. They pit tribes against each other, offering gold, Roman titles, and lands far from their capital's walls. Barbarian mercenaries enter the imperial army, carefully balanced. Enough to fight, never enough to command. Unlike the West, where barbarians seize power, the East controls the chaos with cunning and ruthless calculation. When Attila the Hun threatens Constantinople in the mid-5th century, Emperor Theodosius II chooses payment over war. 6,000 pounds of gold every year. Humiliating? Absolutely. Effective? Undeniably. Attila turns his fury westward, where defenses crumble and chaos reigns. Theodosius's choice buys time, but at a price that echoes through history. Then there are the walls, the mightiest fortifications of the ancient and medieval world. Built between 408 and 413 after a devastating earthquake, these triple-layered defenses stretch over 4 miles from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. A 20-meter-wide moat, a low outer wall with fortified gates, a terrace for maneuvering troops, a second wall dotted with towers every 50 meters, and a final, massive wall standing nearly 40 feet tall, 5 meters thick at the base, crowned by 96 towering bastions, each a fortress unto itself. These walls repel wave after wave of invaders for over a millennium, defying Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Russians, until the terrifying siege weapons of the Ottomans arrive in 1453. In the 5th century, as the West fragments into barbarian kingdoms, Constantinople stands as the lone, true Roman capital. Eastern emperors claim the mantle of legitimate Roman rulers. They speak Greek, govern in Greek, breathe Greek culture, but they call themselves Romans. Romans of the Empire. Basileus ton Romeon, the emperor of all Romans. For them, the empire did not fall. It lost provinces temporarily. They dream of reclaiming these lost lands, holding on to the throne like a lifeline. In a moment steeped in desperation, Emperor Justinian contemplates fleeing the city by ship as rebellion erupts. His generals prepare evacuation plans, but his wife Theodora refuses to surrender. According to historian Procopius, she delivers a fierce speech to a terrified council. Those who once wore the crown must never survive losing it. Purple is a splendid shroud, she declares. Embarrassed and inspired, Justinian chooses to fight, sealing a moment that will decide the empire's fate. Justinian orders his loyal general Belisarius to crush the uprising with a force of Germanic and Hunnic mercenaries. They seal off every exit in the hippodrome, turning it into a slaughterhouse. 30,000 rebels die in a brutal massacre, their screams echoing through the city streets. This terrible decision secures Justinian's reign, but forever stains his legacy with blood. The story of East and West is a relentless cycle of choices, some pragmatic, others cruel, all driven by fear and the desperate will to survive. And as history shows, each decision carves a path that can never be undone, shaping an empire that clings to life amid the ruins of a broken world. What happens when a city lies in ashes, crushed beneath the weight of rebellion and fire? How far will a ruler go to rebuild and to reshape history itself? Justinian faced this brutal reality when the uprising was crushed in bloodshed, leaving thousands dead and the heart of the city reduced to ruins. Yet from these ashes he saw not defeat, but an opportunity. Instead of despair, Justinian chose grandeur. He envisioned a city reborn on a scale never seen before. Towering above all, a church would rise, greater than any the world had ever witnessed. The Hagia Sophia, the holy wisdom, was to be his monument to divine power and imperial glory. To bring this vision to life, Justinian entrusted two mathematicians, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, brilliant engineers rather than traditional architects. Their challenge was staggering. Create a structure that defied convention, with a massive dome that seemed to float miraculously in the air, spreading over 31 meters wide and soaring 56 meters high. For 5 relentless years, from 532 to 537, over 10,000 workers labored day and night, pouring the empire's vast wealth into this single project. The cost was astronomical, equivalent to several years of the entire empire's income. But the result stunned all. A cathedral that redefined architectural possibility, bathed in shimmering light through 40 windows, walls adorned with colored marbles, ceilings glistening with golden mosaics. When the doors finally opened in December of 537, Justinian entered and, echoing ancient kings, declared, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." For nearly a millennium, Hagia Sophia would remain the largest Christian church in the world, a symbol of an empire's ambition and faith. But Justinian's hunger for greatness was far from satisfied. His sights turned to reclaiming the lost West, restoring the Roman Empire to its ancient boundaries. To do this, he needed vast resources and generals who could win impossible wars. Money came through ruthless taxation, driven by John the Cappadocian, the hated but effective Praetorian prefect who crushed corruption and squeezed the provinces dry. Yet the empire's treasure grew ever heavier on the backs of its people. And for generals, Justinian had Belisarius, a young, brilliant commander, fiercely loyal and almost unstoppable. In 533, with only 15,000 men, Belisarius was sent to wrest North Africa from the Vandals, barbarians swollen with luxury but weakened by internal strife. In a lightning campaign, Belisarius crushed the Vandal armies in 2 battles, captured Carthage, seized King Gelimer, and annexed the entire kingdom. North Africa was Roman once more, a stunning reversal that shocked the world. Emboldened, Justinian immediately unleashed Belisarius on Italy, where the Ostrogoths had ruled since 493. Unlike the Vandals, the Ostrogoths were fierce warriors, their kingdom stable and prosperous under Theodoric the Great, until his death in 526. Civil war fractured their realm, and Justinian seized the moment. Belisarius landed in Sicily in 535, swiftly conquering the island before advancing up the peninsula. He took Naples, Rome, and Ravenna. By 540, the Ostrogoth king Vitiges was captured, and Italy seemed won. But the war was far from over. The Goths were resilient, rallying around Totila, a young and dynamic king who reclaimed almost the entire peninsula. Rome changed hands repeatedly. The conflict became a grueling war of attrition, devastating Italy's lands and people. Suspicion and distrust poisoned Justinian's mind. Doubting Belisarius's loyalty and fearing his growing power, Justinian repeatedly recalled and reinstated the general, destabilizing command at critical moments. Finally, in 552, Justinian sent another general, Narses, into the fray, a new chapter in this brutal struggle that would decide the fate of the empire. How far would Justinian push his empire and his generals before the weight of ambition crushed them all beneath it? The story of these fateful decisions is yet to unfold. If you want to uncover more stories where history's greatest choices shaped the world, subscribe to Quiet History. What does it truly cost to reclaim a lost empire? Can victory erase the scars of decades-long warfare? When General Narses crushed the Ostrogoths at the Battle of Tegina in the year 552, killing Totila, he did not just win a battle, he sealed a fate. 20 brutal years of war left Italy a desolate wasteland. Cities lay in ruins, the countryside was ravaged beyond recognition, and its people were decimated by war, famine, and plague. Rome, once the eternal city, had shrunk into a mere shadow of itself, a small, abandoned settlement with broken aqueducts and crumbling monuments. The Roman senators fled to Constantinople, abandoning their heritage. Yet, had Italy truly been saved, or merely broken beyond repair? The answer was grim. Italy would never fully recover, and as the ashes still smoldered, a new threat loomed. The Lombards, a barbarian tribe, invaded northern Italy in the year 568, reclaiming much of the Byzantine conquests. While the West struggled to hold on, Emperor Justinian faced an even greater challenge. With the battlefield scars barely healed, Justinian embarked on an unprecedented mission: to codify Roman law. Centuries of laws, edicts, jurist commentaries, and rulings had created an impenetrable labyrinth even for the wisest lawyers. Justinian sought to clarify, organize, and purify this chaos. He appointed a commission headed by Tribonian, his quaestor, igniting a colossal legal quest. In just a few years, this team produced the monumental Corpus Juris Civilis, a massive body of civil law consisting of 4 parts. The Code compiled all imperial laws since Emperor Hadrian. The digests gathered the wisdom of great classical jurists. The Institutes served as a law textbook for students, and the novels contained Justinian's own new laws. This monumental work was completed around the year 534 and became the bedrock of law across the empire. But its influence would echo far beyond Byzantine borders. Centuries later, in the 12th century, Justinian's Roman law resurfaced in the West, studied in universities, and becoming the foundation for modern civil law across Europe. The Napoleonic Code, along with German, Italian, and Spanish civil codes, all trace their roots directly or indirectly to Justinian's visionary legal work. Yet no legal triumph can erase the human cost of empire. Justinian's reign extended beyond law to religion, a source of fierce obsession. In the year 553, he convened the Second Council of Constantinople, seeking to reconcile Chalcedonian Christians and Monophysites. Instead, he deepened divisions. He closed Plato's Academy in Athens in 529, exiling the last pagan philosophers. Systematic persecution of heretics, pagans, Samaritans, and homosexuals followed. His empire became a crucible for orthodox purity, but this zeal sowed long-lasting discord. Provinces like Egypt and Syria, dominated by Monophysites, felt increasingly alienated, vulnerable to future conquest by the Arabs. As Justinian's empire tightened its grip on doctrine, a darker shadow approached. In the year 542, the plague struck, what we now call the Plague of Justinian, likely the first recorded bubonic plague pandemic emerging from Africa or Central Asia. It claimed countless lives, further weakening an already fragile empire. Meanwhile, the long war against Persia dragged on. 26 crushing years, marked by exhaustion and devastation. Avoiding decisive battles, the conflict sapped resources and morale until, in December of 627, Byzantium delivered a crushing blow near the ruins of ancient Nineveh. General Heraclius overwhelmed the Persian army led by General Rhazates in a brutal confrontation. Yet victory here was Pyrrhic. The Sasanian king Khosrow II, a paranoid tyrant, refused peace and blamed his generals for cowardice. His own sons deposed, imprisoned, and executed him. His successor, Kavad II, signed peace, returning all territories, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Armenia, back to the Byzantines. The true cross was triumphantly returned, and in September 630, Heraclius entered Jerusalem in a grand procession, bearing the sacred relic himself. This was the apex of his reign, perhaps the most glorious moment in Byzantine history. But beneath the triumph lay a bitter truth. Both the Byzantine and Sasanian empires were utterly exhausted after a quarter-century of relentless war. The reclaimed provinces were devastated, depopulated, economically shattered, and no one yet saw the storm gathering on the horizon. In the summer of 631, for more gripping tales of empire, fate, and irreversible decisions, subscribe to Quiet History. Who was Muhammad ibn Abdullah? A barely literate Arab merchant from Mecca, dying quietly in Medina at the age of 62 in the year 632. His death barely rippled across the vast Byzantine Empire, unnoticed in Constantinople. But what did the Byzantines truly know about the Arabs? Nomadic Bedouin tribes of the desert, forever divided, constantly warring among themselves, sometimes hired as mercenaries by Byzantium or Persia. Nothing threatening. Or so they thought. Then came Muhammad's unimaginable feat, uniting these fractured desert tribes under a new religion, Islam. A faith demanding absolute submission to God, sparking an unstoppable wave of conquest. His immediate successors, the rightly guided caliphs, inherited this explosive momentum. By 634, just 2 years after Muhammad's death, The first Arab-Muslim raids struck southern Syria. The aging, ailing Emperor Heraclius barely raised an eyebrow. After all, Bedouin raids were nothing new to Byzantium. But these Arabs were different, fiercely driven by a monotheistic faith promising eternal paradise to martyrs in jihad, a holy war. Their tactics were revolutionary. Lightning-fast strikes on camels, vanishing into hostile deserts where heavy Byzantine armies could not follow. And most devastatingly, the local populations of Syria and Egypt, predominantly Monophysite Christians, saw the Orthodox Byzantines as religious oppressors and fiscal exploiters. Many greeted the Arab conquerors not with joy, but with passive acceptance, sometimes even collaboration. The stage was set for a seismic shift in power. Then came the battle that shattered an empire's illusion of control. The Battle of Yarmouk in August of 636. In a deep valley near the modern Golan Heights, a massive Byzantine army of roughly 40,000 men faced the Arab-Muslim forces. A scorching summer wind blew sand into the eyes of the Byzantines, blinding them as the six-day bloodbath unfolded. Slowly, Byzantine formations broke, pushed toward the edge of a deep ravine. Thousands fell, plunging into the abyss or slaughtered on the ground. This was not just defeat. It was a catastrophic military collapse. Syria was lost forever. Damascus fell in September. Antioch, the empire's third city, succumbed in 638. Jerusalem surrendered the same year after a brutal siege, with Caliph Omar himself humbly entering the holy city on foot. The Arab tides surged onward. Egypt invaded in 639. Alexandria fell in 642. Within a breathtaking decade, Byzantium lost its richest, most populous, and most ancient provinces. Emperor Heraclius died broken in February of 641, powerless to stop the collapse of everything he had fought so hard to reclaim. His successors were weak. The empire was forced into strategic retreat. The Arabs pressed on relentlessly. In 674, their fleet even laid siege to Constantinople for 4 years. Yet the city endured, protected by impenetrable walls and the secret weapon of Greek fire, an incendiary liquid that burned fiercely on water, projected through siphons onto enemy ships. Constantinople survived by a miracle, but the empire was now reduced mostly to Asia Minor, parts of the Balkans, and a few Italian territories. The Arab invasions continued unabated. Carthage fell in 698, and all of North Africa was lost. The Arabs crossed the Strait of Gibraltar in 711, conquering Visigothic Spain within a few years. In 717, they once again besieged Constantinople by land and sea. That siege lasted a brutal year. Constantinople survived again, saved by its walls, Greek fire, and an exceptionally harsh winter that decimated the besiegers. But the empire had entered what historians call the Byzantine Dark Ages. Its territory was sharply reduced, its economy partially collapsed, and its cities shrank. The decisions made in those fateful decades, choices born of faith, fear, and ambition, had reshaped the world irreversibly. What if Heraclius had acted differently? Could the Byzantine Empire have survived intact? Or was the rise of Islam an unstoppable force, destined to redraw the map of history forever? The echoes of those irreversible choices still resonate today. Subscribe to Quiet History for more stories where human decisions change the course of civilizations. What happens when a mighty empire begins to bleed its own lifeblood? The population shrinks, yet the Byzantine Empire stubbornly clings to survival. It reorganizes its military districts, called themes, transforming soldiers into land-holding peasant warriors bound by hereditary service. This system forges an army fiercely dedicated to defending their own soil. But as loyalty hardens into iron, the empire faces a storm more devastating than any battlefield. In the 8th century, the empire is torn apart by the iconoclastic crisis, the greatest religious upheaval in Byzantine history. In the year 726, Emperor Leo III, known as the Isaurian, issues a brutal decree. All veneration of icons, holy images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and saints, is forbidden. Influenced by the strict monotheisms of Islam and Judaism, Leo condemns icons as idolatrous blasphemy, ordering their systematic destruction. But the faithful will not surrender quietly. Iconophiles rise in fierce resistance. Monks suffer exile, torture, even blindness. Riots ignite. The debate over holy images becomes a battlefield of theology and politics alike. For over a century, iconoclasm dominates, save for a brief respite under Empress Irene. The empire is trapped in a vicious struggle, one that threatens to tear its spiritual soul apart. Then comes the turning point. In 843, Empress Theodora restores the veneration of icons, ending the crisis. This triumph is enshrined in the Orthodox Church's calendar, celebrated on the first Sunday of Lent. Yet, while spiritual stability returns, the empire's trials are far from over. The Arab forces are pushed back, but a new menace looms on the Balkans. The Bulgars, a Turkic people whose fierce raids threaten Byzantine borders. Emperor Nicephorus I meets a grim fate in 811, killed fighting the Bulgars. Their leader, Khan Krum, turns his skull into a drinking vessel, an eternal symbol of Byzantine vulnerability. Yet, over time, the Bulgars adopt Christianity and soften their hostility, shifting the balance of power once again. The 9th and 10th centuries herald a mighty rebirth under the Macedonian dynasty. Basil I, once an Armenian peasant with unmatched strength and cunning, ascends the throne in 867. His descendants rule for nearly 2 centuries, ushering in Byzantium's golden age. Territories are reclaimed: Crete in 961, Cyprus, Cilicia, and parts of Syria. Prosperity surges. Constantinople swells to 1 million souls, thriving as the hub of Mediterranean trade. Byzantine merchants reign supreme. Culture flourishes. Scholars copy ancient Greek texts, preserving classical knowledge itself. The Imperial University grooms educated officials, sustaining a vibrant civilization. Yet beneath this renaissance, shadows gather. Fast forward to the shattered economy and dead trade of later centuries. Genoese and Venetian merchants seize control, carving out extraterritorial enclaves within Constantinople. The Genoese colony of Galata, across the Golden Horn, grows richer and more populous than the imperial capital itself. The city's population plummets, perhaps to just 50,000, 1/10 of what Justinian once ruled. Palaces crumble. Emperors retreat to modest quarters. By now, the empire survives by diplomacy alone, skillfully balancing Western powers against a rising new threat, the Ottoman Turks. Emerging from a tiny beylik in northwest Anatolia in the late 13th century, The Ottomans, founded by Osman, begin their relentless expansion. Each generation presses further into weakened Byzantine lands, carving a state stronger than any before. The Ottomans do not merely conquer. They build an efficient administration that attracts Christians with lighter taxes and religious tolerance. Many Byzantine cities and peasants prefer Ottoman rule over corrupt imperial officials. This shift marks the beginning of the end for Byzantine sovereignty, a slow, inexorable collapse born from the empire's own fractures and flawed choices. As the Byzantine Empire wavers on the edge of oblivion, the question remains, could different decisions have altered this fate, or was the fall inevitable? What price was paid for every choice made in desperation and defiance? The answers echo through the ruins of a once glorious civilization. If you want to dive deeper into the dramatic rise and fall of empires, don't forget to subscribe to Quiet History. What happens when a single decision reshapes continents? When a call for help becomes an invitation to conquest? In the year 1354, the Byzantine usurper John Cantacuzinos summons the Ottoman emir Orhan to intervene in a civil war, inadvertently opening the door for a relentless force. The Ottomans cross the Dardanelles, stepping foot on European soil for the first time. They come as allies, but will they leave as conquerors? Once the Ottomans taste the wealth of the Balkans and witness the fracturing of Byzantine and Slavic states, their ambitions ignite. Cities fall, one by one, subdued by a disciplined and loyal military machine. By 1365, Sultan Murad I boldly moves his capital to Adrianople, renaming it Edirne, signaling to all that the Ottomans are no longer outsiders, but a rising power in Europe. The noose tightens around Constantinople, inch by suffocating inch. Imagine Constantinople at the dawn of the 14th century. A fortress island hemmed in by Ottoman territories on every side. Its citizens can only venture beyond the city gates with the Sultan's permission. Emperors reduced to paying tribute, forced into humiliating vassalage, balanced on a knife's edge between survival and annihilation. The city clings to life, but for how long? Then comes Bayezid I, nicknamed the Thunderbolt for his lightning-fast campaigns. In the year 1390, determined to end the lingering threat of Constantinople once and for all, he unleashes a massive siege. 7 brutal years drag on, thousands starve, walls shudder under relentless assault, yet the city's heart beats stubbornly on. Bayezid erects the fortress of Anadolu Hisar on the Asian shore of the Bosporus, sealing off vital eastern supplies. The city teeters on the brink of collapse. But fate twists abruptly. From the east rides Timur, the conqueror who claims lineage from Genghis Khan. His empire spans from India to the Mediterranean, and he sees the Ottomans not as rulers, but as usurpers. In the summer of 1398, at the Battle of Ankara, Timur shatters Bayezid's forces. The Sultan is captured, imprisoned, and dies in captivity. The Ottoman state fractures, torn apart by fratricidal strife. Constantinople breathes, momentarily spared, but only for a while. The Ottoman phoenix rises once more under Mehmed I and Murad II. They rebuild, reorganize, and reclaim lost ground with ruthless efficiency. By the mid-15th century, the empire is more formidable than ever. In the year 1451, a young man of just 19 ascends the throne. Mehmed II, destined to be called Fatih, the Conqueror. His obsession? The impenetrable walls of Constantinople, a 1,000-year-old symbol of Christian resistance in the heart of Ottoman lands. Mehmed understands that brute force alone won't topple these legendary fortifications. He turns to technology, calling upon Urban, a Hungarian engineer rejected by the Byzantines for lack of funds. Urban crafts colossal cannons unlike anything the world has seen. The largest, named Basilica, weighs 19 tons, stretches 8.5 meters long, hurls stone balls weighing 600 kilograms over 1.5 kilometers. Its thunderous roar echoes for 20 kilometers, but it fires only 7 times a day, cooled carefully between blasts. The siege is no longer just a battle of men, but of machines, of iron and fire. To choke off all aid, Mehmed constructs Rumelihisar, a fortress on the European shore of the Bosporus, directly opposite his grandfather's Anadoluhisar. Together, these fortresses seal the strait, cutting Constantinople off from the north, tightening the noose as never before. The city's fate hangs in a delicate balance. Will iron and ambition finally crush the ancient walls? Every decision echoes with irreversible consequence. Every siege, every cannonball, every fortress built is a step toward destiny. In this crucible of fear, power, and unyielding will, the fate of empires will be decided. Will the ancient city fall, or will it hold against the unstoppable tide? The answer lies just beyond the horizon, where history and fate collide. If you want to witness the next chapter in this relentless saga, subscribe to Quiet History and journey deeper into the past, where every choice changes everything. What does it mean to stand against an unstoppable force? How far would a leader go when the fate of a centuries-old empire hangs by a thread? In the summer of 1452, Mehmed's campaign to conquer Constantinople reached a critical point, transforming a tense standoff into a deadly siege. In just 4 feverish months, by August of 1452, Mehmed had reshaped the city's defenses with cannons poised to shatter its walls. When a Venetian ship tried to sneak through without permission, he sank it without hesitation. A clear message. Constantinople was now completely blockaded, cut off from the world. The city's last emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, aged 48, faced this grim reality with mounting dread. Desperation drove Constantine to make an unthinkable choice. He pleaded for Western aid, even agreeing to unite the Orthodox Church under the Pope in Rome, a union that violated centuries of religious tradition. In December 1452, within the hallowed walls of Hagia Sophia, the union was proclaimed with solemn grandeur. Yet this act ignited fury among the Orthodox citizens, who saw it as a betrayal. One noble, Lucano Taras, the great duke, reportedly declared that he would rather see a Turkish turban than a Latin mitre ruling the city. The union, intended as salvation, instead deepened divisions and brought scant help. The Pope sent only a few hundred soldiers. Venice and Genoa, locked in mercantile rivalry, offered minimal support. The empire stood isolated, abandoned by allies. On the morning of April 6, 1453, Friday before Easter, Mehmed's massive army materialized at the city's walls. Between 80 and 150,000 men, sources vary, with a fleet of over 300 ships and towering siege cannons, the monstrous Basilica among them, ready to unleash destruction. In stark contrast, Constantine commanded roughly 7,000 defenders. 5,000 were Byzantine soldiers, the rest volunteers. Among them about 2,000 Italians, mostly Genoese, led by the seasoned condottiere Giovanni Giustiniani Longo. Only a few hundred Venetians, Cretans, and Catalans bolstered the tiny fleet of 26 ships. The odds were staggering, the stage set for a clash that would define history. Mehmed deployed his forces along the entire city wall, personally directing the center at the gate of St. Roman, where the defenses were weakest. His elite troops, the Janissaries, were positioned here. Day after day, week after week, enormous cannonballs pounded the stone walls of Theodosius, carving dents deeper and deeper, each blast a death knell for the defenders' hope. When Giustiniani was severely wounded and evacuated by ship for treatment, morale shattered like the stones under the siege. Panic began to ripple through the defenders' ranks, the resolve crumbling under relentless pressure. Then came the fatal mistake. A small postern gate, the Cerco Porta, forgotten open after a sortie, became the enemy's secret passage. About 50 Janissaries slipped through the gate, emerging between the outer and inner walls, striking the defenders from behind. Chaos exploded. At the same time, the Ottomans breached the main breach at the gate of St. Roman. The defenders faltered, retreated in disorder, and the city was on the brink of collapse. Constantine faced the abyss. He could have fled aboard one of the waiting ships, saving his life as many nobles did. Instead, he chose to stay, to fight to the last breath. Stripping off his imperial insignia, the purple cloak, the crowns, he ensured no one would capture him alive, sparing himself the humiliation of defeat. Witnesses heard his final, haunting words. "Is there no Christian who will cut off my head?" With sword in hand, the emperor charged into the final battle at the gate of St. Roman, surrounded by his most loyal soldiers. He vanished into the chaos of combat, never seen alive again. By 8 in the morning, Ottoman forces controlled the walls and surged into the city itself. What followed was a nightmare unleashed. Soldiers promised 3 days of plunder dispersed across Constantinople, ransacking homes, churches, and monasteries. Men were slaughtered, women violated, children and youths dragged off into slavery. Thousands sought sanctuary in Hagia Sophia, praying that sacred ground might shield them. But even this sanctity was violated. Ottoman troops smashed down doors with axes, dragging people out into the streets. The young and strong were separated for sale as slaves. The elderly and weak were executed as useless. The city's soul was torn apart, its centuries-old heart bleeding under the conqueror's boot. At noon, Mehmed II made his triumphant entry into the fallen city. Riding straight to Hagia Sophia, he dismounted, scooped handfuls of earth, and scattered it, symbolizing his claim over the conquered world's prize. The age of Byzantine glory was over. What drives a leader to sacrifice everything? Faith, allies, even their very legacy. How does fear reshape destinies? The fall of Constantinople was not just a military defeat. It was a series of fateful decisions, irreversible choices, echoing through history's dark corridors. If you found this story gripping, dive deeper with Quiet History. Subscribe now for more tales where human courage meets the grinding wheels of fate. What if one moment could shatter centuries of history? What would drive a man to turn a sacred cathedral into a battlefield? And who decides the fate of empires when the dust settles? Mehmed II strode into Hagia Sophia, the heart of a crumbling Byzantium, commanding an immediate halt to the looting and violence tearing through the once holy space. But chaos had already taken hold, and his soldiers showed no mercy. In the fury of conquest, a soldier smashed the marble floor beneath them, a symbol of destruction echoing the empire's collapse. Enraged, Mehmed struck back, his sword cutting through both man and legacy, shouting that the building was spoils of war, not for soldiers to desecrate. The tension in the air was suffocating, a clash of reverence and ruthlessness unfolding under the soaring domes. Then a voice rose above the turmoil. The muezzin climbed the pulpit, proclaiming the azan, the Islamic call to prayer. After 916 years, Hagia Sophia was no longer a cathedral, but a mosque. This was not just a change of religious practice. It was a seismic shift marking the end of an era, the fall of a city that had stood as the bastion of Orthodox Christianity. The next day, amid the mountains of bodies at the gate of St. Roman, they found the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI. His identity was sealed not by face, but by the purple boots embroidered with imperial eagles he refused to remove, or, as some say, by the tiny golden double-headed eagle on his armor. The man who embodied an empire was dead, his final choice etched in blood and silence. Mehmed II ordered that Constantine be buried with honor, a rare recognition of bravery even in a vanquished foe. Yet the emperor's head was displayed for days at the Hippodrome, a brutal trophy sent to Muslim rulers as proof of conquest. The date, May 29, 1453, would forever be engraved in history as the day Constantinople fell and the Byzantine Empire vanished into the shadows. But could an empire truly die if its legacy pulses in every corner of the world? The Byzantine Empire, the direct heir of Rome, lasted for over 11 centuries, preserving and transmitting a culture that would outlive its political demise. Its legal codes, chiefly Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis, became the foundation of modern European civil law. Without it, contemporary justice systems would be unrecognizable. Byzantine art, its mosaics, icons, and architecture, inspired generations from Venice to Russia. The Basilica of St. Mark in Venice mirrors Byzantine style, while the onion domes and iconostases of Russian Orthodox churches are living testaments to those enduring traditions. Byzantine theology shaped Orthodox Christianity itself, from the nature of Christ to the veneration of icons, debates forged in Constantinople's councils that defined faith for hundreds of millions today. While Western Europe descended into its so-called Dark Ages, Byzantine scholars safeguarded the wisdom of ancient Greece, preserving works by Homer, Plato, Aristotle, Euripides, and Thucydides. When Constantinople fell, these scholars fled westward, carrying priceless manuscripts to Italian shores. Their teachings ignited the Renaissance, a rebirth impossible without Byzantine influence. Yet Byzantium's legacy was not confined to culture and law. Their diplomatic mastery birthed the term Byzantine intrigue. Skilled in manipulation, alliances, and negotiation, Byzantine envoys wielded gold and guile to win wars without bloodshed. These tactics were studied by diplomats for centuries, a testament to the empire's subtle power, even in decline. In the wake of Constantinople's fall, Russia declared itself the Third Rome. Ivan III married Sophia Paleologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor, adopting Byzantine court rituals and symbols. The Russian czars claimed lineage from the Roman Caesars, reflected in the double-headed eagle emblem that became the Russian Empire's standard. Russian Orthodoxy remains a direct continuation of Byzantine Christianity. Even the Ottoman conquerors saw themselves as inheritors of Byzantium. Mehmed II took the title Kaiseri Rum, Caesar of Rome, asserting not only conquest, but succession. The end of Byzantine rule was not a full stop, but the beginning of a transformed legacy, one that still reverberates through history and identity, power and faith, to this very day. If you want to unravel more tales of fate, power, and history's irreversible choices, subscribe to Quiet History and join us on this thrilling journey through time. Who was Caesar of Rome after the fall of the Western Empire? And how did his decisions echo through centuries? How could a city like Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, remain the heart of an empire for nearly 5 centuries more, until 1923? These questions lead us to a story rarely told, a story of survival, identity, and complex power. But why is this incredible saga of Byzantium so often overlooked in Western history books? Perhaps because Byzantium defies our need for neat categories. It was neither fully ancient nor entirely medieval, neither purely Western nor simply Eastern. It was not Greek, not Roman, yet all of these at once. A civilization forged in the crucible of contradiction, a hybrid world where identities blurred and boundaries shattered. This complexity unsettles us because history, as we like to imagine it, is rarely simple or linear. Byzantium forces us to confront the messy truth. History is tangled and unpredictable. Imagine an empire that should have collapsed 100 times, yet stretched on, century after century, always finding a way to survive. A people who called themselves Romans, spoke Greek, worshipped Christianity, and created a culture utterly unique in the annals of time. Their city, a beacon at the crossroads of continents, withstood dozens of brutal sieges, its mighty walls guarding the heart of the world. Until one day, technology rendered those defenses obsolete, and everything changed forever. Why did the Ottoman court adopt Byzantine rituals? Why did the administration of the new empire preserve Byzantine bureaucracy? These were not mere coincidences, but deliberate choices, decisions steeped in strategy and symbolism, preserving a legacy even as the world transformed around it. This transition from Byzantium to the Ottoman Empire was not a clean break, but a complex inheritance laden with echoes of the past. In an age marked by fragmentation and rigid identities, Byzantium offers an unsettling alternative, a model of coexistence and hybridity. Here was a civilization that was Roman and Greek, Christian and pagan, European and Asian, all at once. It showed that being many things simultaneously is not a weakness, but a profound strength. This is the story of fateful decisions, of empires clinging to life, of humanity's relentless will to adapt. Are we ready to face the complicated legacy Byzantium leaves us? Join us on Quiet History as we unravel the tangled saga of Byzantium, the empire that defied extinction, the city that ruled the world for 1,000 years, and the civilization that refuses to be forgotten. Subscribe now and uncover the dramatic, wave-like tides of fate that shaped human history itself.